Amelia felt tense as she walked into the interview room. The loss of her mother was still fresh, and each day seemed harder than the last. She wore her mother's ring on her finger, a symbol of affection that brought her some comfort. It was a simple ring, but it bore an inscription that to her had deep meaning. Her nervousness grew, but she knew she needed the job. Life had gotten harder since her mother left, and the job was a way to start getting back on her feet, even if it was a small step on shaky ground. The office was modern, with large windows that offered a stunning view of the city, but to Amelia, it all felt distant, as if she were in a place out of time. Mr. Reynolds, the boss, greeted her with a friendly smile. He seemed like the kind of person who was concerned with maintaining formality, but at the same time showed a touch of friendliness. During the conversation, he didn't seem to ask difficult questions or try to pressure her in any way. The conversation flowed naturally, but something unexpected happened when he looked at her hand and noticed the ring Amelia was wearing. His eyes lit up for a moment before he approached with an expression of surprise. "That ring," he murmured, as if trying to recognize something. "I have one just like it. My grandfather gave it to me, my sister and I." "The inscription? Can you show me yours?" Amelia, a little surprised, reached out to show the ring more closely. The gesture was simple, but the impact was immediate. Mr. Reynolds studied the inscription, and his face passed through a series of expressions, from doubt to amazement to an emotion he tried unsuccessfully to hide. He held the ring more carefully, as if he were handling something fragile. I don't believe it," he said, mostly to himself. "This ring was given to my sister, my younger sister. She disappeared many years ago." Mr. Reynolds' words were filled with a pain that Amelia recognized, a silent pain that echoed in her own heart. He looked at her, and his eyes shone with a mixture of disbelief and emotion. The interview room, which had previously felt cold and impersonal, was now charged with a different energy. Amelia felt a growing tremor, as if the ground beneath her feet was shifting. She stared at the ring, her hand shaking, trying to process the idea that this was more than a coincidence. Her mother's name, which she had always held close to her heart, echoed in her mind, and a sense of connection began to emerge. "My mother? Your sister? Are you saying that we are family?" The words slipped out of her mouth without her realizing it. Silence fell for a moment, and the man in front of her seemed to search for an answer. Then he nodded, and the revelation washed over them like a wave. The shock Amelia felt was profound, but it was also mixed with something harder to name. It wasn't just the surprise of discovering that the man in front of her was, in fact, her uncle, but there was also a sense of emptiness, as if a part of her life had finally fallen into place. But at the same time, she felt lost, trying to understand how this piece of history had been left behind. Mr. Reynolds seemed to be dealing with similar emotions. He seemed older now, more tired, as if time had finally made sense to him after so many years of uncertainty. "I tried to look for her," he said, his voice breaking. "But after all this time, I didn't know where to look anymore. I never imagined you would be." Amelia looked at him, and something inside her changed in that moment. She had always felt like something was missing, a gap in her life that she couldn't explain. Her mother's death had left her with more questions than answers, and now, there in front of her was a part of her story that she had never known existed. "I didn't know. I never knew about you," she replied, feeling the emotion rise within her. The conversation that had initially seemed to be about a job interview had now turned into something much bigger. Here, in this office, Amelia was finding a piece of her story, something she had never imagined possible. She looked at the ring once more, feeling a rush of feelings, sadness, longing, but also a faint sense of hope, as if her mother was somehow still there, connecting them in a way that only fate could explain. The silence between them was broken by a mutual sense of needing to understand each other better. Mr. Reynolds, his expression softened by the revelation, offered a small smile, the kind of smile someone gives when they finally find something they've been missing for a long time. I didn't know how to start," he said, his voice calmer now. After everything that happened with your mother, I tried to move on, but I always felt like something was missing. And now, I find you here. Somehow, that makes sense, doesn't it? Amelia stared at him, trying to take in everything that was happening. The idea of having lost such an important part of her family for so long made her feel a mixture of anger and relief, as if the two emotions were conflicting within her. She didn't know what to say next, so the silence stretched on for a few more seconds until Mr. Reynolds, sensing the tension, suggested that they sit down. He indicated the chairs near the table and, without waiting for an answer, he sat down first. Amelia followed him, still in a state of shock, and they both stood there for a moment, just absorbing the discovery. "It's strange," she said softly, "to feel like a part of me has always been there, but I never knew it." She looked at the ring on her finger again, and this time, it wasn't just sadness that she felt, but a sense of welcome, of belonging, as if her mother had somehow left something there for her, a piece of history that she couldn't see. But that was now unfolding before her. Meeting Mr. Reynolds wasn't just a revelation of kinship. For Amelia, it was a bridge between a lost past and a future she no longer knew how to imagine. She stared at the man before her, trying to understand the complexity of everything he represented. He, who had seemed so far removed from her reality until that moment, now became the key to so many unanswered questions. "I never knew what it was like to grow up with a family," she said, her tone a mix of vulnerability and distrust. "It was always just my mother and me." Mr. Reynolds, who until then had seemed in control of his emotions, now allowed himself to relax a little more. He seemed to understand her pain, and that was a small relief to Amelia. "You're not alone, Amelia. You never were," he replied, his words simple but full of meaning. It was hard for her to believe, but something inside her told her he was telling the truth. The loneliness that had always been with her began to ease, as if a part of her had finally found its place. "I wish I had had the chance to know her, your mother," Mr. Reynolds said with a deep sigh. "I have so many memories of her, but it's been so long now that I don't know what to do with it all." Amelia felt the weight of those words, and a lump formed in her throat. It was painful, but somehow it was also liberating. Life would never be the same, but just knowing that she still had a family to count on made her feel like the world around her was no longer so empty. As the hours passed, the conversation between the two of them flowed, and the atmosphere in the room seemed to have changed completely. The tension that had initially filled the room was replaced by a sense of discovery, as if they were both trying to understand what it truly meant to be a family after so much time had passed. Mr. Reynolds, now more relaxed, began to share some stories about his sister, Amelia's mother, remembering her with a tenderness that Amelia had not expected. "She was always so determined," he said. "When she decided to go her own way, there was no way to change her mind. Maybe that was what drove us apart. But her strength, I have never been able to forget it." Those words, spoken with such affection, touched Amelia's heart deeply. She had always known that her mother had great inner strength, but hearing it from someone who knew her so well made her feel an unexpected sense of pride. Amelia realized that this wasn't just a job interview she was experiencing. It was a recovery of a part of her identity, a discovery that would help her move forward. Meeting Mr. Reynolds had made her realize that despite her losses, there was still something valuable waiting for her, a piece of her story that was now within her reach. Her uncle's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time since her mother's death, she felt a lightness in her chest. "I don't know what the future holds," she said with a smile that now seemed genuine, "but I know that somehow my mother always wanted me to know who I really am." Mr. Reynolds smiled, a smile that was more welcoming than longing, and in that moment, Amelia knew that somehow she had found the family she had always been looking for. The day went on, but for Amelia, that moment would remain etched in her memory forever. The office, which had previously represented only a job opportunity, was now the scene of a discovery that would change her life. When she got up to leave, after hours of conversation that felt like a relief, A new feeling took over her, that of belonging. She was no longer alone, nor did she feel lost. Her mother, although absent, was somehow still there, uniting them in a way she had never imagined. The ring she wore now seemed to weigh less, but at the same time, its meaning had expanded. It was no longer a simple object of longing, but a link between the past and the future, between her and a part of her family that she had never known existed. As she stepped out of the building, Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the fresh city air fill her lungs. Life, though still full of uncertainty, seemed to have offered her something she never thought she would find: connection. The future seemed clearer now, not because all the answers were solved, but because she knew she was no longer walking alone. She now had a family, a new beginning, and the power to move forward, knowing that sometimes the most painful surprises can lead to discoveries that make life more complete. And most of all, she knew that her mother would be proud of her wherever she was.